Everybody take a few deep breaths with me so we can focus in. Ready? Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. There we go. 3 more. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Last one. Inhale, exhale. There we go. Now that everybody's focused in, welcome to day 4 of our week-long training. I know we've gone through many different things. I know some of you miss training, and the way I do training, it's usually a continuity. So we go from one topic to the next to the next. So if you miss the other days of training and some of this may not make complete sense to you, we are recording all the trainings, and you should be invited to a Facebook page that has all the training that's kept private. So just a heads up. Before I do want to start, I want to introduce you guys to one of my first mentors. For those of you who have been in the leadership training with me, the 21 Laws of Leadership, I mentioned this couple a lot and their names a lot. 10 years ago, to give you guys just kind of a little bit of a background, 10 years ago when we first started, this was kind of happening in my living room. I had no intention of running a nonprofit or doing this, but this couple came and they just spoke over our lives and just kind of guided us and gave us the first seed money to start Higher Ground outside of my living room, and every year they've come back and supported us, and just they've been mentors of mine. A lot of what I explain to you guys and train to you guys are really directly coming from this couple, and I'm really excited. After 10 years, they get to kind of sit in and see what we do. But it's Pastor John and Sister Miliana Harkey. If you guys can just stand up, get recognized. So, like I said, Wednesday and Thursday. What? Oh, okay. So yesterday they did the leadership training. They're doing that again tonight at 7 o'clock. And then tomorrow as well. Tomorrow, as you all know my background, I'm Christian, and a lot of what we do is based on that. So Friday will be more of a church service if you guys want to join us on that. I do want to give them a little bit of a platform, about 5-10 minutes, just to share a little bit about their background and their life and what they do before we jump into training, if you guys don't mind. Is everybody cool with that? All right, so you guys just...
Can everybody hear me okay in the back? Good. Well, as you met, Jansen introduced me. My beautiful wife, Meliana. We've been married 33 years. It'll be in a few days. It'll be 33 years. We met on a blind date. After 1 month, got married. And I praise God that after 33 years, she's still blind. As you can tell. But it's just an honor to be with you, to share a few minutes about our journey. I grew up in Southern California before I moved to Hawaii, middle-class family. But during my junior year in high school, I was a very successful athlete up until my junior year, and I got hurt. And when I got hurt, I had a exuberant amount of time on my hands after that, and started using drugs. Well, that sort of escalated to a point where my senior year, I can remember that I actually OD'd in my art class. I was sitting at the high chair in the art class and fell over and woke up with an IV in me in the hospital. And what happened, the school decided that, well, he's not going to be able to graduate or, at least go to regular school. So they sent me to continuation school. And I kept being a little bit more rebellious after that, where I didn't even want to go to continuation school anymore. My life seemed to be to escalate very quickly in a downward spiral. So, but because my mother had been teaching school in that school district for 35 years, she pleaded with the superintendent to get my diploma. So the reality is I never walked with a class, and if I didn't have a mother that had connections, I probably wouldn't even be a high school graduate today. And so they thought the best thing for me to do was to join the military. And while I was in the military, the basic training was okay, went through my schooling okay, but then I went to Germany and quickly got involved in making lifestyle choices that were probably detrimental. I began experimenting with cocaine more and marijuana, and I ended up getting arrested by the military police on base for selling hashish to an undercover military police officer. When that happened, I was sentenced to 2 years at Fort Leavenworth Penitentiary. And I want to just, as I'm standing here today, the jail didn't transform me. I became more bitter, learned to play the game, and as soon as I got out of jail, I went right back into that lifestyle. But then, maybe a year later, I went back to California, and my brother had a ticket to Maui, Hawaii. And I said, yeah, if you don't want to go, I'll buy it from you. So I bought it from him with the goal of growing Maui Wowie. That was my goal. I was going to be a marijuana farmer. That was my dream. And what happened is my plants didn't grow. And so that put a damper, and I had to go to work. But maybe it was less than a year where I had been there, I met my wonderful wife, Meliana, who was a backslidden Christian at that time. And what happened was, as soon as I saw her, I was actually looking for a date. I wasn't looking to get married. And when I saw her, I just felt this strong knowledge that this is your wife. I said, what? No, that can't be. But a month later, she was my wife. Well, because of her culture, she grew up on a tiny island of Tonga in the South Pacific. We didn't have your traditional dating, and plus we didn't know each other that well. So she didn't know that I just come out of jail. So she didn't know my whole story. So we're actually on our honeymoon, and we are driving around the Big Island, looking at all the sights, and I'm unpacking all this stuff that I went through. And she turns to me and she says, "You need to get saved." Now, you got to understand, I had no religious background growing up. When I went to church, we went to church as a family on Easter and Christmas. That was it. So my religious background I was nothing. And so I was not a man of faith. So I didn't even know what was saved was, but because I was in love with her, I said, yeah, I need to get saved. I said, how do I get saved? You need to go to church. So when we got back to Maui, the second Sunday, my pastor, who's still my pastor today, and my mentor, and my spiritual father, the church is about 30,000 around the world, 5,000 in Maui. He gave an invitation to accept Christ. And so at 22 years old, I went in front, he laid hands on me and prayed for me and led me into a sinner's prayer. And I got born again that day. And I want to tell you something. Today, my life is much different. I travel all over the world. I've written 2 books, and the amazing thing is that I don't know how to spell. Really, because, again, I did barely graduate from high school. But praise God for spell check and a good editor. But what had happened is when God called us into ministry 20 years ago, full-time ministry, kids small, 8 and 10, I felt this strong urge that this is what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to go all over the world and speak about the good news and what the Lord had done in my life. And I want to tell you, maybe you may not be a person of faith, but I do know the fact that you work here, that you are a person of vision. And your vision is to help humanity. And we need more leaders that are helping people. And if you do give it all you have, I want to just say this to you. You'll be rewarded, because the rewards of what we've received is seeing the transformation of other people, even in my own brokenness, in my own weakness. Because the reality of that, we're all broken. But yet, when we touch these children and see their situations, because every time I come, we're at lunch today, I'm asking questions, because I want to learn from what you guys do and utilize what I've learned here into the church world, because I'm not in the education. That's not where I am. I'm in the church. 99.9% of the time, I'm called to minister at church. And that's the realm that's my place of influence and my place of authority. But the principles that I learn about how you deal with conflict, and then your willingness to invest in other kids that are seemingly marginalized by our society, rejected by parents, rejected by society, and to understand that you have value because you're a human being. And we want to bring out the best in you. And so the reality is that you and I do the same thing. We just do it in a different platform. Your platform being educational realm, my platform being the church. And we have to understand that we live in a day and age where people are very, very broken, and they need to be fixed. And so the awesome privilege is that in our weakness, you and I have the privilege of actually helping people get better. Because sometimes when I hear some of the stories that I heard today at the table about a young girl who's 14 that she has to live in a group home because of the system, that rips your heart out, because we know that this person is created in the image of God and not just someone I can push around in the system. So here's what I want to do. See, I define love as bringing out the best in somebody. When you love somebody, you want to bring out the best in them. Regardless of where they may be in their faith, you want to bring out the best in them. And if we can find, in other words, here's what you have to look for. I've got to look for that image of God in you, that goodness in you. Not your evil, not your wrong behavior. I've got to look at the goodness that's in you, because there's something good that God gave you. You were born with it. And sometimes children are based on, because sometimes people are a product of their environment, but sometimes an environment doesn't bring out the best in people. Sometimes the wrong environment brings out the worst in others. So as a leader, I understand that how can I bring you to a place where I can bring the best out of you and then put you in an environment where you can succeed. And I just want to thank you, Jansen, for what you're doing. I've probably taken more time than I need to, but I believe the reason why I come here is I believe in what Jansen is doing, and you are a product of, basically you're a product, and you may not understand this language, you're a product of a prophetic word that was given to him 10 years ago. And that's when the word of the Lord, God speaks through inspiration, and it's like about my future. And I know that this higher ground, the hand of God's on this. And that's why we come back every year, because we want to keep encouraging your leaders, because I can't impact the educational system in the city of Tucson. That's your job. But what I can do is I can impact one person that can impact the city of Tucson. So we need to think about our words and the power of our words, because these words that we have the ability to repair people that we're talking to or cripple them. And because I'm a preacher, I can't stop preaching. And I can tell you this. There's a famous story in Scripture about David and Goliath, and many people know this in this room. I knew it when I was not even barely born again, not even saved. And in that battle, here is Goliath, who literally is such a giant, such a massive figure. He didn't even have to pick up his sword to incite fear in the Israelites. So how did he, because it actually says this in a translation called The Message. When they heard the Philistines challenge, they lost all hope. We have a unique responsibility, because when I hear the wrong words, I lose hope. But when I hear the right words, I become hopeful. Because we live in a culture that's held hostage by hopelessness. Why are they held hostage by hopelessness? Wrong words. So, what happened? David is not hearing Goliath. The nation of Israel was. That's why he was able to not listen to what the enemy was saying and listen to the voice of the Lord. In your particular case, you have to understand, the kids that you're ministering to, impacting, are being held hostage by a spirit of hopelessness. And I believe that your primary responsibility is to give them a sense of hope. Because without hope, I will never think that I can be better. Without hope, I would not be standing here today. Because when, in 1995, which was several years ago, when I felt, John, you're going to step out of ministry, you're going to travel all over the world. That was, I didn't have the money. I did not have what I call any unique ability, but there's one thing I had: hope. And hope proved itself. So I just want to encourage you today, be hopeful, because hope is a great gift. It's a great gift given to humanity. Thank you, Jensen.
You guys have questions?
Feel free to ask. Are you staying the whole time?
Yeah.
Oh, well, he'll be staying with us the whole time. So feel free to ask him as well. If you guys want, if you guys want to talk to him after, you guys feel free to do that. We are, like I said, we will be here at 7 o'clock as well. He'll be doing a leadership training. It's really good. So if you guys want to join us on that, you guys are welcome to do so.
So Pastor Mark and I were talking in the car, and he does interpret dreams and speak in the prophetic. This is not mandatory for you, but if you're interested in it after the training, if that's something you guys would like to hear on your life, or you have a dream that you don't not sure about, Pastor Markey is willing to talk to you guys about it and kind of explain it. But if you guys have any questions, even like what do you mean by prophetic, or you don't know exactly what it is, you guys are more than welcome to ask him now. And you kind of want to open it up, because sometimes it's, well, what is that, or stuff like that. So if any of you guys have any questions for him, feel free to ask them as well.
Yes, sir. But speak up stand up so everybody can see.
What to you is prophetic word?
What's that?
What's prophetic word to you?
Prophetic words?
Yeah, prophetic word. What does that mean?
What is prophetic word? Not what it means to me, what it means, period. What does that mean? Great question. Great question. In Genesis 1:1, Scripture says, the world was without form and was void. How many know that when something is formless, it doesn't have an identity? Right? Something is formless, it doesn't have an identity. So, the first words spoken by God was, let there be light. Right? That's a prophecy. What happened? What happened? That word was set in motion in the atmosphere, and all of a sudden, light happened. So a prophetic word to me is when the reality is, the easiest thing to say is when you're inspired to speak something, and all of a sudden you're speaking, let there be light. And I'm using this analogy. The wording may be different, the dialogue may be different, or the verbiage may be different. But it's for instance, like in Jansen's case. In Jansen's case, you're going to have a building, you're going to be given it a building, says the Lord. And that's basically, I don't know, he would know more, I don't remember exactly the word. So what happened? There was light right there. Something happened. Something happened from the Lord. And all of a sudden, they believed it by faith. They believed that God was speaking to us right now. And then they began to obey it, or walk out it, and that's why it came to pass. Does that make sense?
So after the training, if you guys want to hear more, or get your life spoken over at what time's training over? 5. At 5 o'clock after that, after Jensen does his training, you're more than welcome to come up to him and ask him more questions, speak over your life. We want to be that open to you guys on a personal basis.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. And I want to kind of go off of a jumping point off of what Pastor Markey said about, the whole hopelessness in the system. So over the last few days,
We have really talked about the society systems, right? Who remembers what what we discussed with Dr. Cabrera yesterday? Who can give me a little bit of just synopsis? What did we talk about yesterday? Racism. And what about racism? It is what? Yeah, okay, there's the whole race is and what it isn't. But what about racism? What did we learn from a social system perspective? There's an unconscious, right? There's that whole study that they did at Harvard about, about bias, right? And it's unconscious. What else do we know about it? It's embedded in the system, right? So when we talk about hopelessness in the community, there is an embedded system that propagates and creates this continued hopelessness. And we have to talk about that, right? The society systems. You know, we talked about, you know, and we joked about it today, this whole idea, like, if we ask people, what is the good side of town? What's the good side of town? North side, which really means what? The rich, the whiter side of town, right? And then the south side of town is the less safe. But the question that was posed to us is, how many of us actually look at the crime maps? And when you look at the crime maps, and you can literally Google this up, you will find out that the crime rate between the north and south side is about spread even. That literally there are pockets of very, very safe area in the south side and pockets of very, very safe area in the north side, pockets of very, very bad areas in the south side with the same equivalent amount of pockets of very, very unsafe areas in the north side. So again, this is this whole system. I mean, if you guys want to research how a lot of this is embedded, when you look at schools nowadays, it's more segregated. One of the most surprising studies that they did about 2 years ago in New York public schools, and some of you already know this because you've heard me say this, what are the 2 top indicators for academic success? What was that? The reading level? It's race. And what's the second one? Economic status. That the 2 greatest indicators of success to this day, when it comes to academics, the top indicator still remains to be race and economic factors, right? So we cannot deny that there are society systems, hopelessness, but also at the same time, we cannot deny, and this is part of our social philosophy, that there is a certain amount of skills and individual choices that can make your life better or not better, right? And that our job here at Higher Ground is to live in the middle ground, in the idea that we understand that there are some kids whose cards are already stacked against them. But do we just tell them, well, you know what, poor you, your deck is stacked against you, can't do anything about it, right? We can't do that, but we also can't say, and there's this concept of meritocracy, we also just can't tell them, just work hard. Why? What's the problem with just telling kids to work hard? If you work hard and there's no change, or you work hard and say, me and Andy are both working hard, right? And he's getting more than I do, way more than I do, but the effort remains the same, what happens to me? I start to internalize it and I start to quit, right? So there has to be this idea of attacking both of them at the same time. So when we talk about a lot of these things, a lot of it leads to what this whole topic here, trauma. It's almost always, it's inevitable that if we're going to talk about marginalized population, if we are going to talk about poverty, it's inevitable that we are going to talk about trauma. To give you an idea of how common trauma is in the United States among children, 1 in 4 children in the United States experience trauma before the age of 5. Okay, so think of that number again. 1 in every 4 children right now in the United States, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of race, regardless of what it is, they will experience trauma before the age of 5. What is the problem with that? Who can tell me the problem with that? Why is that such a big deal? Cece. Go ahead, Cece. It creates a constant stress and insecurity with them, right? Now, Mr. Ray, to answer your question, what is considered trauma? The funny thing about trauma, and this is something that scientists have discovered over time, is trauma has very little to do with the event. Trauma actually has to do with what? The perception of the event. So something that is not traumatic for me can be something completely traumatic to another child, because it's all about the perception. So regardless of what the event is, what we know is that 1 in 4 children are experiencing some sort of trauma. And this is based on adverse childhood experience. So this is not just like trauma that doesn't manifest. This is trauma that actually manifests in children. There's signs. And again, this is no different from PTSD. You know, we've given a lot of light to PTSD with our veterans, but what we have not really paid attention to is the fact that we have 5-year-old kids who are manifesting the exact same symptoms of PTSD. Okay, now, when you experience trauma at the age of 5, Cece was talking about how this affects you your entire life, right? But why? Let's go a little bit into the brain. You stall. Developmentally, whatever age you experience the trauma, that's where you're at. So we have kids, for example, that are 10 years old. Developmentally, they experience a trauma at the age 3 and it's not been addressed. What happens? How old are they? 3 years old. Because we have society systems that continue to propagate this. What happens to them? Right? Well, we don't understand why you're doing that. You're 3, so we're going to do the 0 tolerance, right? No love, no grace. We're going to do 0 tolerance on you. We're going to punish you. And so continually, what happens to them? They turn 11, they get re-traumatized. They turn 12, they get re-traumatized. 13, re-traumatized. So they stay 3 years old until they're adults. Right? What else happens to your brain when you experience trauma before the age of 5? Anyone remembers? We've talked about this a little bit. Your brain is 70% underdeveloped. Because brain development, rapid brain development happens between the ages of 0 to 5. Now, let me paint this in a real, just comparison. What we're basically saying is this. You take 2 kids, one who's experiencing trauma, one who doesn't. Both 5, both go to the teacher. They both start reading. Who already has an advantage? The one that did not experience trauma. And take note of that. Was there anything this child could do to get rid of that disadvantage? No, not at that point. So then what happens? Let's just go down the rabbit hole a little bit differently, right? So now we have one child who's behind through no fault of their own. What happens to them? Come on, in a typical school, those of us that work in school, what happens to them? They get labeled. They get labeled. What's their label become? Special ed, can't read, there's a problem. So now, what do they constantly hear at the age of 5? What are they hearing? You can't do it. Something's wrong with you. Something's wrong with you. Why can't you read? Your peer can read. How come you can't read? Age 6, go to 1st grade. What happens? Testing. And what gets reinforced during the test? They're not smart. They're failing. 2nd grade, more testing. 3rd grade now, we have the reading standards. Oh, you still can't read. What happens to you now? You get held back. And then what do we do in the process? Because as an education system, we don't understand this, right? What support do we give them? If they have a problem reading, what support do we give them? Reading interventions, right? Because we only look at the symptoms. It's counterintuitive, but in brain science, what we've learned is that in order for a human being to actually learn, you need to affect all 5 stages of their development, all 5 domains of their development. That's their cognitive, physical, social-emotional, critical thinking, and their social responsibility, moral or spiritual, whatever you want to call that domain. But for a child to actually get better at reading, a child who has trauma, giving them reading support isn't going to do much. Because again, we are just addressing the symptoms. So why else does 70% of your brain underdeveloped? Why does that matter? If you experience trauma at the age of 5, why does that matter? What else does that affect? Social interactions. Right, so here's, again, going back to the example of 2 5-year-olds, one without trauma, one with trauma, social interactions, their social development is impaired. So you have a 5-year-old who's still what? I mean, who's still what? Sucking his thumb, right? Or we could give a more realistic example with our kids. We have 5-year-old that's still what? Wets his pants, right? 5-year-old that still cries in order to get attention. 5-year-old that still can't use his words to express his emotion. 5-year-old who does not know how to control their anger. And then what do they get labeled as at this point? What's their label to them? What do teachers or people around them call them? They're spoiled, they're needy, they're angry, they're problematic, they're disruptive. So they hear this at a young age, constantly. Again, without understanding that this is all just part of the trauma. Now, if you don't believe trauma is a big problem, 76% likelihood of delay in a language if you experience it before the age of 5, 15 times more likely to commit suicide if you experience this before the age of 5, 4 times more likely to abuse substances, 5 times more likely to drop out of school, and 3 times more likely to develop a serious professional problem. Sure. I went too fast. I'll email you guys those, right? So again, this is the problem with trauma. Now, when you are in poverty, again, going back to systems, you are 8 times more likely to experience trauma. And remember we talked about de-escalation, right? This is how humans make decisions. Where do we make logical and decisions that are good for us? At the bottom, when we are calm, relaxed, when we're not stressed. As we climb the ladder and become stressed, what happens? What decisions do we begin to make? Emotion. So we go from logic to emotion. And then at the top of this, we're automatically on fight or flight. This is why you get kids that do self-destructive behaviors, adults that literally make decisions that are bad for them. Right? Because again, if you're constantly living in a life of stress, you have no ability to make decisions that are good for you. Right? Children make the best decisions when they are calm. That sounds so common. That's the truth, right? So again, when you're experiencing trauma and then you add poverty to that, not only are you experiencing trauma one time, you are now in a state of perpetual trauma. Trauma, stress, re-traumatize, stress, re-traumatize, stress.
From then, like that knowledge, is it possible that the trauma, like, that same trauma, like making decisions when you're calm, is it possible then to have the reverse effect, that you only make better and logical decisions when
You're under pressure? I'm sure it's possible. But I mean, right now, we don't know enough about that. So this is kind of where we're at, right? So understanding social systems and how do we impact them individually. So to understand that, let's understand a little bit of trauma. So we know that when they experience trauma, they experience, right, social and emotional impairment, right? We talked about that. That was the whole 15 minutes. So now they're impaired. That's why, if you guys remember, Monday we discussed about the fact that should you take it personally when kids get mad at you? No, right? Because kids will continue to make self-destructive behaviors unless we teach them new behaviors, right? So we have to recognize the behavior, teach them a new behavior, and even upon teaching that new behavior, what do you need to develop a skill? Time and practice. So even if they do learn that skill, are they always going to use that skill right away? No. That's why you can't take this work personally, right? We have to remember that sometimes they're just doing what they know to do. And it is our job to make sure that they recognize it and we give them a different tool, right? Because now they're impaired. Now the next part of that is they begin to adopt behaviors. Right? This is the risky behaviors now. You guys remember the example and the experiment that they did about drugs? You guys remember that example? So I'll briefly put this. They did an experiment on rats, heroin-laced water, right? 50 rats lived in this environment that had toys, games, they had social interaction with humans. Other 50 rats, they were kept in a room, no interaction, no nothing. 50 rats who had happy environment, what did they do? They drank from the regular water. They tasted the heroin-laced water. Did they like it? No, they didn't like it, right? Other 50 rats, same experiment, what happened to them? They took the heroin-laced water and they all became addicts, right? It's an insane experiment that's changing the way we view drug addiction, right? But again, what happens is because of, right here, the trauma, they have impairment, then they adopt risky behaviors. How many of us who work with kids right now know of many kids who are using marijuana to self-medicate, right? It's the way they de-stress. It's the truth, right? So they begin to adopt risky behaviors, and then after that, what happens when you make risky behaviors? Now it goes to individual skills and choices. Regardless of how the society system is built, there are consequences to your actions. So then, what becomes of those consequences? Now they develop social problems. They develop disease, disability, social and health problems. Social and health problems, right? So now you have kids, because of their trauma, social-emotional impairment, they adopt risky behaviors. Nobody stops their risky behaviors. Nobody builds new skills with them. So then they develop health and social problems, and it leads to early death. Whether you want to define that early death as the physical early death, which is an absolute truth, people who experience trauma and things don't change for them, they die earlier. Or you want to put it from a social death or spiritual death, whatever you want to put it, where they have no happiness, no contribution to community, they get to this. So for us, it's about interrupting the process. Okay, because this is where it's going to go. Whether we like it or not, that is what happens. Right? Once a child experiences trauma, if nothing interrupts the process, this is where it leads. That is why it is so important that we understand our job. We understand what we're doing. What we are doing is we are interrupting the process because we recognize the early predictors. These are all the early predictors. See, in the traditional school setting, we just recognize the symptoms. So what do we call them? They're bad kids. These are just bad kids. But are they? No, they're not. They are just a reflection of some sort of root cause. This is that whole root cause of the iceberg. And what we got to address is not the symptoms. When a kid is lashing out on you, again, it goes back to our social philosophy. When a kid say, quit on me or leave me alone, do they really mean that? No, they absolutely do not. Because again, it goes back to what we believe, right? Here's where, again, back to our mission, right? This is why our mission is so important, so we don't mission drift, because this is why we do what we do, right? Part of our mission, we put in there our core beliefs. And our core belief states that what? Everyone is worthy of love. So when a kid tells you, I don't care about you, are they still worthy of that love? Absolutely. When a kid, after you pouring your heart out into them, decides to, flip you off and do something totally against what you're teaching them, are they still worthy of love? When a kid is already adopting risky behaviors and they're already getting suspended or they're already in juvenile court, are they still worthy of love? Yes, right? It goes back to that. But then we also have that secondary core belief, which we say what? Everybody needs to learn self-control. And again, I repeat this over and over because this is one of the hardest things in our work. Love and building character are not separate dimensions. It is a fallacy that we believe in, that we can only either love people or be mean to them and build their character. That is absolutely false. We need to love people, but at the same time, not be afraid to name the behavior and tell them the truth. I love you. You can always run to me. You are safe here. But if you keep doing drugs, this is what's going to happen to you. There's nothing wrong with that conversation, right? Sometimes we are afraid to build the character because we're afraid that the relationship is going to go away. But again, when you make it that way, then you've made it personal. You haven't made it missional, you've made it personal. We have to always do things from the mission, from the perspective of mission. Part of our core belief is we also believe in passion. Right, and again, we did an entire training over the summer about passion. Passion is not this magical thing, right? This is the way the world has led us to believe. Passion, you just find it and it's like waiting for you. No, 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 no. Some people, yes. But in reality, passion is just how you see what you're doing. You can be passionate about many things. But how do we build passion? Who remembers how we build passion? How do we build that love for things, that joy to do things? Exposure. That is why we want our kids to experience new things, be exposed. They did a study on reading comprehension, right? And kids, when you get them to read a book that they're actually interested about, what happens? Their reading scores go up, right? But when they don't know anything about it, their reading scores are low. So why does that matter? Well, it matters a lot. Because if you're in the low-income side of the world and you're reading about books that you have never experienced before, what's your comprehension going to be like? You're not going to get it. But if your parents travel and they take you places, you can relate to a lot of books, right? But again, we don't look at that in the education system. We just say, well, they can't read. I bet you anything, I give that kid a book on Minecraft, they can read. These kids can play computer games and they have no problem reading. They have zero problem reading. We have kids at second grade, higher ground. They're programming Minecraft, they have zero problem reading because they're exposed to it. Exposure matters. In order for kids to fall in love with something, they need to be exposed to things. And then finally, we talk about vision. We believe that for kids to be successful, they need to have a vision. Right? I always make this comparison. Love and self-control is like the chassis and the engine of the car. You get a good chassis, you get a good engine. But passion and vision is your fuel, right? That's passion, and vision is a driver. Right? You can have a great car, but if it doesn't have a tank of gas, is it useful? No, it's a terribly useless car, maybe except for car shows. Yeah, I mean, if it's a Mustang, 1969 Mach 1, well, I don't care. It's a cool Mustang. Who cares, Rima? It's a Mustang, right? But the reality of it is, again, right, on a serious note, I can have a Lamborghini, I can have the highest performing car. If it doesn't have gas or it doesn't have a driver that knows how to use it, is it really going to reach its potential? No. I might actually break the car. a Tesla, right? I might actually break the car. Yeah. So that's why we believe that love, self-control, passion, and vision, these are the things that our kids absolutely need. When you think about it, this is what we're trying to replace all their trauma symptoms. So we're trying to counteract years and years of this. We're interrupting the process by giving them all of this. Right? Now, the problem is love and self-control, love and building character, we can do that. Passion and vision, we can't give that to them. Right? Passion, that's why I said, it's important that you are passionate. You can't be working with kids and show them that you're bored out of your mind. It's those subtle things that matter. If you're talking to a kid, be excited. If you're a nerd, be a nerd. Right? If you're passionate about something, share that with the kids, as long as it's appropriate. Right? Make sure you're sharing appropriate passions. But, yeah, Andy, you're definitely disqualified. But again, it's important for our kids to see passion. This is why we love college volunteers coming here, because it exposes them to different things. If you're passionate about music, share that. Because you don't know what these kids are exposed to, and giving them a counter exposure is everything. Right? Yes, social systems are stacked against them. But you know what? Once we teach them that and we give them enough skills, they can do it. Think about two athletes, right? Think about two kids. Here's the example I'd like to give. You have one kid who is 6 foot tall and a kid who's 5'5". All right? Shut up. All right? And they say that they want to play sports. Right? Would you tell that kid to play basketball, the 5-foot kid? Probably not. But what if that kid really wants to play basketball? What would you do? They're both 12. You will train them differently, right? You will expose them to a different training. You will tell them, look, all right, you probably will have a really hard time making it into the basket, you know, and not getting defended. So I will teach you how to do 3-point shots. I will teach you how to use, again, understanding how that system, understanding his biology, that's what makes a good coach. A good coach recognizes what systems are stacked against their players and what skills their players need to overcome that. Because our job is to basically turn trauma into overcomers. Because think about you who work with the kids. Majority of us here can raise our hands when we say we've experienced trauma. That's why we do what we do. No, you haven't? That's why you're an ex-felon, right? Because you haven't. Majority of us can feel that empathy for the kids. Why? Because we have been there. We have been there. Maybe not all of us, but for majority of us, we understand this. But again, it took somebody interrupting that process for us to open. Right? This is why passion, again, is so important amongst us. This is why I constantly warn you guys, if you're feeling tired, take care of yourself. Because kids, what's the first thing that we learn about kids? What's that one truth we admit to? Kids learn anywhere, anytime, anywhere, everywhere. They don't just learn when you're talking to them or when you're teaching them. They learn when you're not. So if they see that you're passionate, they are bound to either copy your passion, question your passion, or simply observe your passion. But either way, it creates that exposure. And then finally, vision, right? That's why it's important we share with the kids our personal dreams. Because here's the deal. It's a change of language. Imagine, again, going back to society systems. This is why it's so powerful for kids to read about figures of different races and heroes that are of different color. Why? Why does that matter? It goes back to hope. Because all of a sudden, if a child can hear somebody they can relate to, oh, they were able to do it. Well, guess what? Maybe, just maybe, my destiny isn't just what my entire family is. All my uncles are in jail. But you know what? Here's another person who looks just like me, who I can touch and see, and they're not in jail, they're in college. That's interesting. Maybe I can do that too. Or even if it's a different color or a different socioeconomic background, just the exposure to your vision is enough for them to say, maybe there's a different world out there. And again, it's being able to really get to this idea of interrupting the process. Because here's the only thing we know scientifically. Science. There is only one thing we know that changes trauma, that heals trauma. Who remembers what that is?
24 hours or something.
Right? The only thing that interrupts this process is 25 hours a week. Of what? Who remembers this? Of intentional nurture. Yeah, we can word it whatever we want. It's love. But scientifically, the only thing that interrupts the process of trauma and heals it is literally intentional nurture. Not this in passing, hey, how are you, but intentional. What does it mean to be intentional? That means words matter, right? Your words, your gestures, how calm you are, how comfortable they are with you. That's why it goes back to this other pyramid. I know I love pyramids, right? But what was the first part of the pyramid? Safe. And then the second part is support. To interrupt the process of trauma, kids need a place where they feel safe and supported. Now, does that mean that they'll stop adopting risky behaviors? No, not necessarily. They may still adopt those risky behaviors. That's just part of it. But again, if we are building character with them, given enough time, you can counteract those effects. And this is why it is very important that we literally, because what we do is human dependent. It's personal development. Because here's the reality of it. This work would be so easy if scientists can just discover a manual. Here is a 10-step guide on how to deal with trauma. Right? It's like what Dr. Cabrera said. Here's a 10-step guide to not be racist, right? But it doesn't work that way. It's literally human relationships. The key to all of this, to turn this, is healthy relationships. And again, it all boils down to this part. A healthy relationship is defined by how much I love you and how much I'm willing to build your character, but also recognizing it takes time. That's why sometimes we can be working with a kid for an entire year and not see any progress. And guess what? That's okay. As long as you're actually doing the love and you're building character, you're not letting them get away with things. But at the same time, they know you are a safe place they can run to every single time. Guess what? It takes time. And unfortunately, there's no way to speed up or slow down this process because it's all, again, people dependent. But the point is, do you have a healthy relationship enough to interrupt the process of trauma? And how do we do that? That's what we're going to review today. Questions so far? Andy.
A lot of the teachers or teachings, something I read a while back, we're told that if the kid more is caught than taught,
Speak up, I can't hear.
more is caught than taught,
Mm-hmm.
you can tell them what you're doing, but they're watching you, so they're going to catch what you're doing more than listen to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Timmy shared a very powerful story, and one of this is he's been mentoring this kid for a year and a half. And some of you know his phone and his wallet got stolen. And this kid he's been mentoring for a year and a half, we haven't really seen much change in him until the last few weeks. And he said, you know, what clicked is finally when somebody stole my phone, they asked me, don't you want to beat up the kid that stole your phone? And his response was, well, you know, I'm more sad that he doesn't feel safe enough to come back here. Because I'd rather have him come back. I'm okay with him stealing. I'd rather him come back and just admit it. And that kid did a flip. Now, Timmy wasn't trying to teach him. He's not that great of a teacher. That's why I can trash talk him, right? He's not trying to intentionally teach him, but again, to the child, he caught that. It's your subtle. That's why, again, it's this whole being intentional. Your intentional nurture matters. If you're frustrated, they feel that. If it's just a check off to you, okay, I talked to you about this, check. I talked to you about this, check. Talk to you about this, check. They feel that. If they know you weren't prepared to talk to them, they feel that. And it goes back to, remember, society systems. These kids are already hurt. They already don't trust adults. And you're just adding another reason for them not to trust adults. That's why a lot of these stuff really matters. Other questions or comments?
I think that a lot of times, because it does take longer than we expected, that's when, as adults, we give up on the child, because the time frame will never be our time frame. It's gonna be the time frame of the child, and so we can have the kids for 5 years, and they come back 6th year, still the same way, but the 10th year, they finally get it. And it's frustrating as adults to see it take so long, but I think one of the things we have to remember is time is the time of the child, not our time. It's when they get it, when like that boy that we've been working with for 2 years with Tim finally got it. It was on his time. So we cannot get frustrated if it's not happening within the year. We have to know that that timing is going to be theirs and when it all comes together. So don't get frustrated when you don't see the changes right away. Just keep working at it, keep working at it. It does eventually happen. We have kids that have taken 10 years and then they leave the program and then 5 years later they're coming back the exact same way when we met them 10 years ago because they reverted back to, that intentional has to be key. You have to be every day when you walk into this place. I'm going to serve. I'm going to be intentional in what I do, no matter how hard or how frustrating the kids are today. That intentional has to be key every single day. And that's the hard part for us who are not, isn't it?
And I want to really add to that. It doesn't matter what your role is. You could be the person cleaning. You could be that one-time person that they meet that you're doing the testing. You could be the small group coordinator. You could even be just the person literally passing by. Passing by. You have nothing to do. Every action that we do when they're here matters. Because you have to remember, the only scientific healing right now is 25 hours a week of intentional nurture. I want you guys to really understand this. So what happens then if a child who has experienced trauma, which is highly likely, is in a dysfunctional family? Where do they get that 25 hours a week of intentional nurture? Are they going to get it at school? Probably not. They're already labeled. So what other avenue do they have? So we At bare maximum, we get them 10 hours. So literally that 10 hours that we have them, we have to be extremely pointed and intentional. We all have to be on the same page, that we are here to love these kids because they're worthy of it, and we are here to build their character. We all have to be in that same page. Rima.
Given the timepiece, how can you, when do you know when to like move on to the next thing or to change up your approaches for like continuous improvement with like a certain student? Like you never know what's going to hit at what time, so that's what like I struggle with.
It's a good question. So for the group, when do you know, when given the timepiece, when do you know it's time to switch the strategy up with the child? Who can answer that? Who can no, that's a very good question. I want to see, because some of us have been doing this a long time. I want to see what you all think.
In my experience, that fruit is the indicator.
Mhm.
If I'm doing something and it's not being fruitful with that child or with its personal life, I probably need to change what I'm doing.
But the question is, how much time do we give it before we recognize that it's not bearing fruit? It is a very hard question. I do have an answer for it. 7 days? 7 days you cut it off? So after... Yeah, what was that? Okay, so with the child itself, that's correct, as long as it takes. So we never give up on a child. So that part is like embedded in our mission. But you're asking more the strategy, right? Yeah. So we're asking more the specific strategy we're using. The strategy. The given, and I want to be very clear what Cece said, when it comes to the child itself, there is no time limit. As long as that child is willing. The only time limit there is when the child like runs away and they don't want to be here anymore. Okay? But when they come back, guess what? The time resets back to 0. The moment they come back, it resets back to 0. But, okay, so the strategy. What were you going to say, sir?
Well, I think that you can't put a time. Because if you put a time limit, you just close the door.
That
I'm
is...
going to give you a year. And that's what we do in our culture. We put a time limit. If you don't change, then I'm leaving you. If you don't get on board, then and that's not love.
Yeah.
Based on like when to change the strategies, I believe was the question.
Yeah.
I say the time for when to change strategy, either the approach you had originally isn't working, to where you have to figure out the time you change the strategies is when either they're starting to agree with how you're doing things, or you have to find a different approach to get to the kid.
Okay. Any other answers before I give mine? Rima? So when do you know, so we're all in agreement, and we have a time limit for us to like leave a child, right? Unless they leave us, but when they come back, the time resets again to 0. So we're all in agreement with that. Rima's question is, on a specific individual child, when we're interrupting the process, when do we know it's time to switch up the strategy with that child?
There's no strategy.
Well, there has to be a strategy, though.
Strategies, though, like good ones, are adaptable, especially when the individual adapts to the strategy. Like, kind of Rio's right, like the strategy should be ever changing if you're continuously keeping up with that individual. So the strategy is simply just something it's an outline to what you should be doing with the child. But if you're looking at the child and exposing their passion and talking to them like we generally are, intentionally we should be changing
Okay, who has a different answer?
I think it all also goes back to you knowing that child, that relationship that you've made. So once you make the relationship with that child, you know everything about that child, that in-depth part of that child. So you'll know, because I think the child will come in one day a certain way and then the next day a certain way, so you have to change it up anyway. So that's why I'm saying it's like a hit and miss type thing, because that child will display 9 different behaviors in 3 days. And so what worked yesterday is not gonna work today. So that clean slate thing kind of, and you always have a plan B, and you always, it's kind of like, to describe how we have to do it with the kids that have the behavioral health issues and stuff like that, is, okay, you're gonna try this, it didn't work, okay, that's okay. I'm not gonna take it personally, first of all. Number 2, let's try something else, that's not gonna work. So you always have this box with you, with different gadgets and everything in it, and you're gonna try this one. Okay, that didn't work, that didn't work. And then you do find the one thing that works, and you're just like, oh yes, this works, and you put it to the side. And then tomorrow you bring that same thing that worked, and it's not working, so you go back to your little magic bag. Okay, we're gonna try this again. So I think there's really not an answer to that, but there's solutions to it, because every day is gonna be a different solution. Every hour is gonna be a different solution. And for the 4Gs, every 10 minutes is a different solution. So, you know, I think there's not a way we can explain how to do it. It's just gonna be that gut feeling. I know all of us have that gut feeling. It's that feeling deep down inside that says, okay, I'm gonna try this. And then there's that one time that it just works and it sticks and it works for all 10 kids. And that's where we get our data from.
Any other answers before I give mine?
Can I answer my own?
Go ahead, Rima. Of course you can answer your own question.
So, I definitely agree with what everyone has said, but my initial instinct is to say, like when it's straining on the relationship, just because like with the strategy, like trying different strategies is really great, but it's also like when you know, or when the student is really attracted to that, it's like the best strategy for them, or the best way to work with them, and then one day it's just kind of like
Or they're so smart that they find out the strategy.
right. So like they're working, they get it and it's good, but then it like snaps and it's like not good, but you're like, no, this still needs to happen. So you still push for that, and you still push for it because you're like, they're gonna come back to it, they're gonna come back to it. But then, because you never know when it's actually gonna like stick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I feel like maybe it's when you push so far that they pull completely away from you, and that's when you need to change.
You actually really did answer it. The strategy and the switch of strategy is driven by your relationship with that child and your motives. It's literally the simplest answer to it. Because once you see that the strategy is straining your relationship, you have to switch it out. And once your motive for that child changes, and what I mean by motive is this: when you make it personal and when you make it about you, I want this child to change because I've invested so much in this child, that's when you know you have to switch out the strategy. Because that's when you know it's now a selfish reason. And it's no longer about that child. Now you're the savior mentality, which again, we've said, we are not their saviors. These are not kids to be pitied upon. They're kids to be loved and have compassion on. Right? So it is literally, the strategy is driven by your relationship and your motives. If you know that your strategy is not straining the relationship, keep at it. You will be surprised what is not working for an entire year all of a sudden may work. Or you may be surprised how much a simple little direction or misdirection changes everything. The point is, as long as your strategy is driven by your relationship and driven by our core beliefs and our mission, here's the honest answer. Trees bear fruits at different timings. Does that mean that a tree that bears fruit a lot longer than a tree that bears fruit a lot quicker, does that mean this tree is broken? No, absolutely not. It just means that their fruit takes a longer time to ripe. Pomegranates drive me crazy. Why? Because pomegranates are they're like the devil's fruit. They come out and they look so good, but you have no idea whether they're ripe or not. And it takes months. And then these little insects come in and you have to protect them from that. And then figs, on the other hand, it takes like 1 week and they're rotten. Right? But again, does that make the fig tree better than a pomegranate tree? No. There are two completely different fruits. I have two different relationships with those trees. Right? Two different ways of caring. Two different seasons of harvesting. Yeah, we have them in our backyard. That's why I know this. Right? Two different ways of harvesting. And now add the apple tree to that. That's an even more problematic tree. Because it's dead for the entire winter. And you want to uproot it because it looks dead. And then springtime comes, you don't know what to do with all these apples. And you're throwing apples away. Right? But the point is, it is driven by your individual. And I want to write here, individual. Because every child is a different kind of seed. And here's the beauty about seeds. Right? At the end of the day, you throw them, they grow. You're not responsible for how they grow. Sometimes you put the seed in good places and they grow well, and everything you teaches them, it nourishes. This is the part where the individual choices come in. Yay! But sometimes you plant the seed, and no matter what you do, the soil is just really bad. And guess what happens? It doesn't grow. Guess what? That's why it's not your personal job. At the end of the day, right, we got to dust off because we have to remember, okay, the seed is growing at a different rate. But that's why your strategy is driven by that. That's why it's so important you have an intentional relationship with the child. And if not you, use your community members to build even more. That's why we do mapping as a group. That's why we do mapping as a group. Because sometimes, here's the reality. The person's experience on different fruits matter. You know what? I'm used to taking care of apples. This is an apple. I'm positive this is how long it'll take. But another person might be better at pomegranates. Right? So again, that's why that matters. Andy? Oh, absolutely.
We may not make all of our hard work come to fruition. So, it may be their first job or in college or at home with their parents. We may not even be there for it.
Correct. Anybody else?
And that's why it's so important too, going back to what Rima said about what if you've tried everything and it's just not working. It's okay to pass that child to another person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that relationship is going to make it click. So you've kind of, going back to the tree scenario, you've pruned it, you've taken care of it, but it's still not, the fruit's not there. But somebody else can just come and have the magic question. I kill every plant that comes my way, as Rebecca, that's why she has all the green stuff up front that she used to. Because I can kill seeds. But Rebecca, she just looks at it and that plant grows. And so that's how it is with kids too. If you're working, and you're getting frustrated and you just can't take it anymore, it's okay to pass it on because we all have the same mission, we all have the same drive, we're all doing the same thing. Pass that child on to somebody else. So don't forget that too, that you also have to look at your inner self and do your inner talk and do your, okay, is this child driving me crazy? Is this child causing me to not sleep at night? It's okay to pass them on to somebody else so that way you can survive in this job.
Absolutely. Anybody else? All right, so before we go to the next part, which is actually how then do we build this whole love character, what does that look like? What are some strategies? What are some tangible tools? We take a quick break. We're gonna take a quick 5-minute break.
After
and then
eating
we are
super
gonna come-
fries, it's not a good idea to play dodgeball. Okay, so everybody focus in, focus back in, focus back in, focus back in. Thank you. Okay, so let's actually look at social emotional learning and the game of dodgeball, right? We're gonna think about this a little bit. So most of us already went through my training about social emotional learning and the different domains. So I'm just gonna kind of go over it really simple, really quickly, for those that haven't been here. And for those of you that want a little bit more, I gave you guys, there's a website you can go to that we use. It's called castle.org. All right, there you can look at the social emotional competencies and you can look at the 5 domains that we discussed. So for us here at Higher Ground, right, our focus is social emotional learning, right? There's 8 dimensions of wellness. You guys remember that? There's the physical dimension, right? Cognitive dimension, or intellectual dimension. Then there's the emotional dimension, social dimension, environmental dimension, professional dimension, and then what else am I missing? Environmental, professional, huh? Occupational, and then finally spiritual, right? So wait, did I double something up? You sure?
You said professional and environmental,
Financial. So there's 8 dimensions of wellness. So the theory behind the 8 dimensions of wellness is these are the 8 things, 8 in order to be happy. Because at the end of the day, what do we all want our kids to be? Happy. Successful and happy, right? But we have a caveat here at Higher Ground, right? Our definition of success is what? Community contribution. We don't want kids that are just happy because they're selfish, right? We want kids, ideally, our definition of success at Higher Ground is we want kids that are actually giving back to the community, all right, contributing to the community. That is a very important concept, right? Why is that? Because, again, at the end of the day, right, this is where the analogy that I make. As a jiu-jitsu coach, if I make jiu-jitsu champions who, after 10 years of being at Higher Ground, winning 100-some medals, is still an angry child, a selfish person, still exhibiting all the self-destructive behaviors, right? To us, is that successful? No. It's just like the phenomena that we see with professional sports. 90 to 95% of NFL players end up bankrupt after 5 years within retirement. So I want you guys to really think about this. One professional football player will have wasted more money than all of us combined. Right? So that's not our definition of success. Right? For us, our definition of success is community contribution because, again, back to the 8 dimensions of wellness, it's not just financial success. It's also spiritual success. Where do they see themselves in the larger part of the universe? What is their purpose? Social success. Do they have good friends? Are they able to socially communicate? Do they have peers that influence them to do things that will be better for them? We talk about physical money in the world, but are you physically healthy? Do you know the food choices that you need to make to live a longer life? Are they emotionally healthy? Sure, you have the money in the world, sure you have this, but if you're constantly depressed, anxious, and you have no support system, or you feel alone, right, what is the point of that? So for us, we say that kids, it's not just enough for them to be individually achieving things, they need to be contributing to the community. And part of being able to contribute to the community is they need to be healthy in these dimensions of wellness. Right? And for us, we really focus on the social and the emotional part of this. Right? Social emotional skills is defined as 5 domains: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills. So examples, and like I said, I'm breezing through this, you can read this on your own. Example of self-awareness, right, is self-efficacy, self-confidence, right? Examples of that is being able to identify emotion. How many of our kids don't know the difference between being angry, being afraid, and being sad? Again, back to trauma. Their only expression for all of those is to punch somebody. Why? That's the only example they see. Kids learn everywhere, anywhere, anytime. Right? Remember the original definition of discipline. Who remembers it? What does it mean to discipline? To teach mostly by, to imitate. Discipleship is the process of what? Disciplining someone is the process of what? Teaching them and telling them to imitate you. That's why discipline should not just happen when they do something wrong. Discipline should happen all the time, right? We discussed that. So again, back to that concept, if a child is only able to see their father or their mother whenever they get angry or frustrated hitting, and they're 5, what do you think their norms become? That when I'm angry, frustrated, it must be okay to hit. Or let's take that a step further, an abused child. Then his response becomes, well, whenever adults are angry with me, what do? They beat me. Therefore, whenever I'm angry, I beat somebody else. Right? So identifying emotion, that part of self-awareness, is so important. Because if you cannot identify the emotion, you cannot identify the response. If you don't know the difference between you're afraid versus you're angry, that's very dangerous. And the funny thing is, a lot of adults are growing up not able to identify the difference between fear and anger. And so therefore, they look angry all the time. But really, a lot of it is driven by insecurity. Fear. Are they going to like me? Is this going to happen? So they manifest that through anger. So it's important we teach our kids self-awareness, right? Self-management is more of our focus here. This is things like self-control, impulse control, grit, right? The 21st century workforce will need self-control and impulse control more than we realize it. Here's the reason why. A lot of our jobs will be taken over by artificial intelligence and robots. So a lot of interaction with technology requires a lot of impulse control. Because if you're easily distracted in the midst of very sensitive technology, what happens? If you leave it for a few minutes, even a few seconds sometimes, what happens? Everything collapses. Right? It is literally one of the most, even in your job, think about how much our jobs require our own personal impulse control. That's why for some of us it's so hard to teach a class. Because we're just as ADD as the kids. That's why when I do training, we have to play dodgeball and basketball, because I can tell at the point where everyone's getting antsy and no one's really paying attention. So it's so much better to actually spend 10, 15, 20 minutes to unwind and get everybody back to focus. But the problem is teachers don't recognize that in a classroom. It's literally that easy. Let the kids run around for about 5, 10 minutes and bring them back. So much science have been done on that. Right? But again, impulse control. Self-management is so important. Goal setting, grit. We talk a lot about grit. This is where that falls. Self-control and grit. Right? Grit. Grit is this idea of having passion and perseverance for long-term goals. The very concept of grit, all right, which we will discuss more, is around self-management. Being able to identify what your emotions are and what the reality is. Should I quit? Well, I feel like quitting. And you know the crazy part is, how many of our kids, or even adults that we know, when they feel like quitting, they just quit. That's a skill, to not quit. Believe it or not, that is an actual skill. Being able to persevere despite the obstacles, having hope. There's 4 elements to grit, right, which we will discuss in depth later on. There's passion, being able to be interested, having love for it. And again, passion is not this magical thing. We did an entire day studying passion, right? We hear it all the time. You know, find your passion. Yes, that's true for some, but sometimes it also just means Be passionate with what you're doing. Right? There's 3 types of bricklayers to describe passion, right? One bricklayer says, I'm building a wall. A second bricklayer says, I'm building a church. A third bricklayer says, I'm building the house of God. Who do you think will be happier in their job? Kenji, who do you think? Go ahead. The one who finds the purpose, the passion for it. The one who finds bigger meaning and love for what they're doing. There's this guy interviewed about, he's a garbage man. He quit his professional job of being in the front office to be a garbage man. And he was so happy. It's a real story. And scientists studied him. And they were asking him, why are you so happy? Because in his mind, he's passionate about picking up trash. So again, passion is not always this magical thing you find. Sometimes passion is your outlook about what you're doing. That's part of grit. The second part of grit is guided practice. If you want to get good at a skill, what do you have to do? You have to do it over and over again with people telling you what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right. We have created a culture where we're afraid to tell people what they're doing wrong. We're afraid to tell kids what they're doing wrong. But if you don't tell them what they're doing wrong and no one's telling them what they're doing wrong, guess what they're practicing? The wrong things. Or we've created a culture where we only tell kids what's wrong without building a relationship with them. Why would they listen to you? They don't care what you know till they know you care. But again, guided practice. Third part of it is purpose. In order for you to have passion and perseverance for long-term goals, you need to know that what you're doing is not just something selfish. Do you know, whether you believe in religion, spirituality or not, scientifically, there is a study that states the following things. Selfless people live a longer, happier life. People who volunteer, people who do something that is selfless, literally, by way off margins, are happier, healthier, and oh, by the way, they have more chances of success at whatever career they choose. Because again, purpose. Deep down inside us, the way our brains are wired, we are wired to de-stress when we're doing something for somebody else. So that's why it's important to teach kids purpose behind what they're doing. And finally, hope. Knowing that, guess what? It's not time to quit, because I can get better. Things can get better. Despite the social systems stacked against me, there can be change, right? So that is all part of self-management. Kids have to learn this skill. This is not something you are born with. It may feel natural to some of you because you had people who taught you it, because you were disciplined in it. You had someone to imitate, an adult or a parent that you imitated, who you saw grit and impulse control. But for some of our kids, they've never seen an example of self-control or grit. They see the adults in their life constantly quitting on them, leaving them, or they see adults in their life who have no impulse control. They buy whatever, spend whatever, have substance abuse, do whatever. So it's important for kids to learn, again, self-management. Social awareness is kind of one of those things where it's empathy, respect for others. This is a skill. Empathy is a skill. Respect is a skill. One of the biggest things that I learned, that I always tell him, why are you so disrespectful? Why are you so disrespectful? I never bothered listening to that kid until one day I had an epiphany. I should listen to this kid. So I finally asked him, do you like disrespecting me? And he tells me, no, I respect you the most out of everyone I know. I'm like, then why do you do what you do? And he tells me, I didn't know I was disrespecting you. You're telling me that you yelling at me and cussing me out is not disrespect. Well, yeah, my uncles, that's how they treat each other. They call that respect. And I'm like, oh, well, we need kind of a baseline of what respect is. Again, that's when I realized even being respectful is a skill. It's something you learn. Like I said, for some of us, this is so natural. Why? Back to discipline. We had a home to imitate. You had adults to imitate. But for kids who don't have that, then again, the social social awareness, that's a skill. Relationship skills. Teamwork is a skill. Teamwork is a skill. Communication is a skill. It doesn't matter how big my vision and mission is, if I'm not able to convince you that it's good, none of you will be here. Whether you recognize that or not, the reason you are here is because we have effectively communicated what your role is and how you might be able to play into this vision. I can have a vision that is worth $1 billion. It is worth a squat if I can't sell it. It's communication. Communication, however, is a skill. Again, if kids don't have a model of how to communicate, they can't do that, right? That's part of relationship skills. Social engagement, friendship, making friends is a skill. That's weird to hear that, but let's be real. We have kids who don't know how to make friends, how to interact with peers. We have adults who don't know how to make friends and build relationships. This is why you have businesses that are failing because upper management don't know how to build relationships. How many of you, don't raise your hand, have left a job because of poor management? Terrible bosses. Because your bosses don't know how to build relationship. They don't know how to communicate. That is an actual skill. And then finally, decision-making skills. This is being able to evaluate and analyze risk. Some of us are in their 30s, like myself, we still don't have good decision-making skills. Why did I do that? I know that was horrible for me, but somehow I did not make a responsible decision. But again, that's a skill. This is by the area by which we address trauma. Now, I'm not saying trauma only affects social emotional learning. Trauma affects physical things, trauma affects a lot of things. But for us, our focus is on social emotional learning. Because let's look at the reality. The 21st century workforce, they will need the following skills. First one is impulse control, like I said. But do you know what other skills they're going to need? What other skills is the 21st century, the next 20 years, what other skills are they going to need? They're not going to. I'm going to tell you guys that right now. Thank God. They're really not. Why will they no longer need math skills? Kenji? Technology. Because of Google, smartphones. I don't even need to type the numbers on my smartphone anymore. I literally just have to say, Google, what's 9 times something, square root, blah, blah, blah. I can give it complex formulas. But that's what we drill to our kids. You know, believe it or not, 21st century workforce ain't going to need handwriting that much either. Creativity is one of the most important skills. Inspiration. Computers can never do the work of artists, can never design buildings, they can never preach, they can never teach. So there you go, Pastor Harkey, you will always have a job. But creativity, but again, right, part of creativity is all these things. You cannot be creative if you can't even identify your own emotions. How do you create if you can't even identify what's going on in your own mind? Part of being creative is being able to calm or to operate despite the stress, stay calm, being mindful while there's stress around you. Ask any creative person. I write novels and poems. I have to be in a state of calm. It doesn't mean I'm in a state of happiness. I write better when I'm a little sad. But I have to be able to remove the stress, because if I'm thinking about higher ground and all the stress, I can't be creative. I have too much worry. To be creative, I have to have this space where it's me. I pray. That's my personal thing. Because when I pray and meditate, I can be creative. But again, it's mindfulness. Whatever word you want to put it, it's mindfulness, right? But again, that is part of social emotional learning. The 21st century workforce don't care if you can sit and get lectured for 2 hours. Like what we're doing right now, 21st century workforce, what kids are doing 8 hours of their day, they don't care about that. But we continue to do that in schools. In fact, most of the jobs will not require this. You can YouTube this guy. There's this guy who invented a whole bunch of things and quit high school. You know what he did? He studied on YouTube. That's literally what he did. He quit school, studied on YouTube, and he's now a billionaire. Kenji, you can't do that. There's at least an expectation of you graduating high school. Now, you can be a billionaire and then graduate high school. I'm okay with that. But again, the environment is changing. Creativity matters. What else matters in the 21st century workforce? What else do you think employers are going to need? Oscar.
I'm just going to take a shot at the dark communication skills.
Absolutely, actually. Because here's the deal. Communication will never go away even with machines. Because you need a good communicator to communicate to the machines. You need someone who can interpret our language into machine language. And even then, humans will always need to communicate ideas. Communication is a skill that the 21st century workforce will need. But you know what we do in schools? We stifle communication. Don't talk. Shut up. Be quiet. Whatever idea you have is not good enough. We stifle creativity, we stifle communication. And then here's another one, and there's probably a lot more, but in our context, these are the most important part. It's collaboration. The reason why is billion-dollar companies are figuring out that the best way to monopolize the market is not to create your own products, but instead to collaborate with each other and buy each other out and merge. Disney and Fox. Office Depot, Office Max. I can give a ton of examples. They're finding out that the best way to do it is actually not by competing with each other, but by monopolizing things, by merging. Collaboration is going to be key in the 21st century workforce. But if you have a bunch of kids who do not have social emotional skills because of trauma, and we're definitely not teaching it in the classroom, these are kids who we are setting up. You want to talk about systems? We are systemically setting up kids who already don't have opportunity to have even less opportunity in 10, 15 years. Let me be real with you guys. One of my biggest fear is what's going to happen to a bunch of our kids who are going to graduate high school, because this is a real problem right now. 70% of high school graduates in Arizona are not ready for the workforce. 70% spent 12 years in their school not able to do the following 3 things. Fill up a job application, pass a basic interview, and follow basic commands. That is the measurement of ready for a job in the 21st century. 70% of our high school graduates spent 12 years in school not able to do that. I am positive you guys can think of peers or even your own kids probably who probably will fail at that test. I'm positive of that. I know kids who will fail at that test. 12 years in school. College kids and college volunteers who I would totally not hire on the merit of those 3 things. Because they literally either can't follow a simple directive, cannot fill out a resume, or don't have enough communication skills in an interview. Well, I don't know. You're a college graduate. Like, this is literally a basic question. And you can't communicate. It's not that they're dumb. They're absolutely not. But again, it goes back to social emotional skills. They don't have relationship skills or self-management or even the self-awareness to do a lot of these things, right? And collaboration is important. So let's look at dodgeball. This is the funny part. Social emotional skills, we are literally reinventing the wheel. Because here's the reason why. 40 years ago, this was not a problem. For 2 specific reasons. Who can tell me what the 2 specific reasons why this was not a problem 40 years ago? Why social emotional skills was not that big of a problem years ago?
Assembly line.
Playgrounds. Recess and playgrounds. Do you know how many studies after studies have shown the effects of removing recess and playgrounds? Because let's look at the game. And the second one is modeling. They spent time with their families and their neighborhood or community. Back then, kids weren't locked in their rooms because they're afraid of their neighbors. Back then, kids played outside with their neighbors. So they learned social emotional skills, and they went to other people's homes. So they learned to interact with adults. There were adult models all the time. Some of you can still remember that time. Now, but again, let's look at the game of dodgeball. In the game of dodgeball, you had to have impulse control. You got hit. I don't want to sit down. I don't want to tell the truth. I don't want to admit that I got hit.
Me.
Yeah, you. Right? That's impulse control. It sounds silly, but remember, these are skills. It needs to be practiced. The best way to practice something is when you don't realize you're practicing it. Collaboration. I'm the tiniest guy, and I was guarding somebody taller than me. Right? But me and Holly were collaborating. And then I would pull people, hey, you're bigger than me, and I can't cover Holly. Come here. Collaboration, right? That's collaboration. That's a skill, right? Being able to protect Kenji. That's a skill. Communication. Hey, I'm out. I know this sounds so common sense, but these are skills that we take for granted. Hey, I'm out. Or, you know what? This is what we're going to do. We're going to make a plan. Think about, there was no leader in either teams. Right? But no, let's be real. There were no leaders. And yet, your group came to a consensus on who the medic was going to be. Every single time. Now, some of you may have been a little upset. Man, I wanted to be medic. I'm better qualified. I'm faster than this dude. And, well, what is she going to do? She's going to scream. She can't even dodge. Right? I mean, let's be real. Some of you internally felt that. But again, you are aware of your emotions and where you're set, and it wasn't a big deal. You didn't throw a fit about it. Now, think about the game of dodgeball with a bunch of kids who don't have social emotional skills. That's what we do. Friday Fun Day. They can't cooperate with each other. They cry. They get mad for not getting picked. And I'm not talking about our elementary kids. I'm talking about our high school kids. They get mad when they're out. They walk off. They stop playing the game. Right? But you know why? They're out of practice. We have effectively gotten rid of so many things that are social emotional learning. Right? And like I said, I'm giving you guys a funny example, but it's a real example. See, to teach kids social emotional learning, you don't need 100 steps and 100 strategies. You just need to be intentional. This is part of the first thing I want you guys to learn. A whole lot of physical activity and play literally teaches social emotional learning. You know what? Literally sitting down with a kid playing cards with them is social emotional learning, if you're intentional about it. You know what? Talking to a kid and telling them, stop, I'm still talking, your turn, and you stopping and listening to them, that's social emotional learning. Helping a kid to express themselves, that's social emotional learning. But the problem is, like I said, they're out of practice and guidance. So when you're with them, your job is to practice that with them and guide them through it and not get frustrated because they can't do it. You know what? Since you all are crying and complaining about dodgeball, we ain't playing anymore. That's what I see adults do all the time. We're done. No. Set boundaries. Teach them. Teach them. Yeah, is it more of a headache for us? Absolutely. And the question becomes, why do we adults have to change? It's simple, we're passing the baton. This life isn't about us anymore. Sorry, all of us here who's doing this work now, you are officially no longer the future. God dang it. You're officially no longer the future, my friends. We are no longer the future. It is now Kenji's generation. Right. Our job now is to pass on the wisdom and encourage that fire. But you know what we do a lot of times is we hoard the wisdom and kill the fire. That's what we do. We hoard the wisdom and kill the fire. That's why every generation thinks the next generation above next to them is beneath them. You know, if we treated generation gaps the way we treated racism, it'd be a different conversation. But again, that's what we do. But again, as adults, we have to make the intentional effort to provide practice opportunities. And like I said, it is literally as simple as, and I do this to kids all the time, if I'm talking to somebody and they're talking to me, how many of you know what I do? And they start talking to me, what do? I tell them, just a second, wait, hold that thought. And I keep talking to the adult. And then once I'm done talking to adult, I go to their eye level, all right, tell me what you want to tell me. And I listen. During that, literally, 10 to 15 seconds, what skills did they learn? Name it. Patience. They learned patience. What else? Huh? A social skill, that it is rude to interrupt people. What else? We said patience. Impulse control. Hold the thought in their head. You know how hard it is to hold a thought in your head? Very hard. Right? Hold the thought in your head. What else did they learn? Social constructs. Social constructs. That most communication happens two-way, and there's turns. That's a very important social concept. That's why teams can't work, because everybody wants to talk. Nobody wants to listen. Very, very important concepts. Right, that was literally 15-second interaction. But again, if you're afraid to name the behavior, and you're afraid and you're like, oh, okay, or you're impatient and you don't have love, go away. Then you miss a teaching opportunity. A very simple teaching opportunity that every day happens in classrooms, and I see adults waste it. I literally see adults waste that opportunity time and time again to model effective communication right there and teach social emotional skills, right? So again, a lot of this is really putting intentional effort, right? And I'm going to repeat that because it's a very important part. Intentional effort in making sure that you are teaching the skills. That every opportunity is a practice opportunity, right? So let's think of, before we move on, give me another example of something everyday and something simple where we can teach social emotional skills. Not just at Higher Ground, just anywhere. Acting, drama. Theater is a very, very, very great way to teach social emotional skills. Why? Who can tell me why? What skills do they immediately learn in acting? Huh? Identifying emotions. What else? Obviously, impulse control. Learning their lines, which requires impulse control.
Like appropriate interactions, because like they learn the script, and so this is how people are supposed to talk. So
interaction, social interaction. What else? Who can name another outside of Oscar? Who can name another? You just went into my first part. Listening intently. This is a simple everyday practice that adult requires of children, but adults don't practice. I'm going to say that again. This is an everyday skill that we as adults require from children, but we don't practice as adults. We tell our kids all the time, listen, but the moment they talk, we go either into problem-solving mode or assumption mode. I'm a parent, I know this to be truth. They start talking, I already know what you're going to say, so I'm going to say it for you. Or, it sounds like a problem, so I'm going to solve it for you.
So we take away their communication.
We take away their communication, we take away their impulse control, not because we're taking it away from them, but because we're modeling the exact opposite. We're modeling the exact opposite. And then usually we're not gentle. So we're yelling at them. So we take away the example of being gentle. And usually we're not kind with our words. So we take that away right away. So immediately we remove patience, impulse control, patience. We remove self-control, right? The impulse control, the self-control. We remove like being able to communicate effectively, using the right words. We remove empathy. You guys realize that? When you guys interrupt people to problem solve them, you remove empathy right away. And yet, we require kids to listen all the time. And we wonder why they don't know how to listen. Watch the adult models. I see it all the time. Like I said, especially parents and teachers, all the time. And I know this because I am a parent. And I'm telling you, there are so many times that I have interrupted Kenji for the mere fact that I don't need to listen to him because I know what he's about to say. Probably is. It's trauma. We're giving him coping skills. That's why jiu-jitsu exists for him. Throw skids as a way of coping mechanism, right? But again, listening intently is something you can do as an adult to teach social emotional skills. When you love someone, you listen to them. You know what is the greatest action of love? It's when someone listens to you and then acts based on what they listen to you from. When they hear your very thoughts, your very emotions. That's one of the times that scientifically people feel the most loved. You know why counselors and psychiatrists exist? They're really, and I don't mean this from a bad perspective, but in reality, they're really useless. But because we live in such a broken society, we need them. Why do we need them? Because sometimes we just need to vent and have someone who will listen to us and won't judge us. See, listening intently shows so much love because at this point, if you're not problem solving, you are not judging them. You are not making assumptions. That's the only reason counselors and psychiatrists exist at such high rate right now, because we live in a world where we can't talk to anybody without feeling judged or that somebody making assumptions. Right? That's another thing. Here's the other thing that listening intently shows: value. People want to feel valued. How many of you like being devalued, being treated bad? Any of you like that? That's a self-destructive behavior, by the way. So if you raise your hand, you need a psychiatrist. But here's the reality, right? When you listen intently, the moment you interrupt someone, you make the conversation about you. The moment you interrupt someone, it's no longer about that person's ideas. It's about you. And again, children learn anytime, anywhere. You know why they have a problem with authority? Why they can't listen to authority? Because we have never modeled that for them. Model it for them. Show them that you can listen intently. 90% of the time, that kid's rant isn't going to last more than 10 seconds. 90% of the time. And then you have those 10% that can last 90 years. Right? But you know what? You listen to that kid's rant one time, and you have found a best friend. A leech who will not stay away from you. But again, because they feel valued. When you listen intently, you show basic things such as respect and honor. That I honor you, I value you, that your voice is important to me. And you know what? They will reciprocate that. And now you can set the expectation that when you're talking, guess what you have to do? You have to listen. But now I modeled it to you. Because you were talking, I was listening. When it's my turn, I can actually tell you, don't interrupt me. Did I interrupt you when I was talking to you? No? Okay, so we are going to do the same thing. Again, naming the behavior. It's okay. Right, naming the behavior. We shush him when we're all doing the same kind of like side talks and stuff, right? It's a typical example right there. If an adult does it, we're okay with it. You were shushing me, okay. No, but in reality, right? Again, listening intently matters because of the respect and the honor that we show somebody. And that right there is social emotional skills. Here's the other part. Simple thing is showing them how to and being relaxed. Why does this matter? Kenny. Okay.
When is it though, maybe I might be able to answer this myself, but it's just like, when is it, like, so like listening, for example, like I draw, like when I'm in a lecture hall or something like that and everything. And ever since I was a child, it was like, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. But it's like, I actually pay attention more. I have something in front of me that I'm doing. I'm able to listen to it like on the side. But if we're trying to like show that level of respect and that honor or whatever, then like I need to draw or I need to be doing something, or like, I mean, even in our own staffing, with this, because you know me, I'm able to like stand up and stretch and take like Fern's another person stands up, stretches and stuff like that, but like we're listening. But then if we're just sitting there and we're tired, or I know I'm speaking for myself, I'm just sitting there looking at you, I'm thinking about a jillion different things, so it's like that respect that doesn't really matter.
Absolutely. So again, I didn't put in there listening quietly. I didn't put in there listening, sitting down, doing absolutely nothing. What I put in there is intent. So if you're drawing and listening intently, as long as your expectation of that child is the same way, I'm okay with kids. When I'm talking to kids, that's why I requested papers and Legos. I'm okay with them fidgeting with things while I'm talking, if I know they're listening intently. That's why relationship matters, because I know you, I know you're listening to me, right, when you're doing those things. But another person, I may know they're absolutely not listening because they're absolutely distracted. But that's why relationship matters in this setting too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like I'm seeing it from more like a raw point of view. So like you know me, but like let's say I'm in a room with somebody else, and then now it's like he's not paying attention, and I've learned to like lie basically. Like yeah, okay, I care, but in my head I'm like, what am I gonna have for dinner, or what is my workout today? But you know, it's not.
So.
But now I feel like I'm shorting them at the end of the stick for not.
So in that setting, I guess what I would say is that's where a different, and depending on which role you play. So if you're the person who is sitting down, having to listen, and you know that the expectation in the room is to be quiet and not fidget, then that's where impulse control really comes in. Do you see what I mean? But if you're the deliverer, that's where social skills and relationship building comes in.
Do you think those will ever bridge? Do you think those will ever make will collaboration happen between something that actually matters and something that doesn't? Or will we just kind of do them to fit the mode?
I hope that it does happen. That's a hope. That's why I'm teaching this. Because I'm hoping that when we're the deliverer of the messages, that we build those relationships to understand the individual needs of those listening to us. That's my hope. Does that answer your question, Mr. Ray?
One of the things we have to realize is that kids are different now. Look at the King from No Man's part. Kids are able to do more than one thing at one time. Kids can be listening to you at the same time, just as intently. And for us, it's a disrespectful thing because you're not paying attention to what I'm telling you. But it's unusual how kids can do so many things at one time. They can be reading and listening to you, and you can question them about what you said, and they'll tell you. And we have to be careful when we start judging kids for not doing what we think, because we think that they should do something. And they're actually doing, but because we think we know better, we kind of quell what they're already doing.
Absolutely. That's why, again, it's the part of that I want you guys to focus on is us being able to listen intently to them. Right? And again, they will model the skill.
I told kids at the age that the difference between adults and kids is that we can pretend. So like, if you know that you're in front of a teacher who has no patience on like fidgeting or whatever, only thing that the teacher wants to see from you is staying quiet, and then just stay quiet. So it's like I say, like I don't care if you actually like listen to me and keep it in your head, because that's not something I can control.
Mm-hmm.
But at least show me that you kind of care and that like what I want you to do here. Because I mean, I know some kids, you know, like you say, like they can do other stuff and listen to me, but if this is the kind of rule, then like, well, we do better with all this that we can pretend. Like,
Yeah. Well,
match the expectation, like, show that this is what
we learn to lie and cheat better. I mean, that's the truth as adults. Yeah. No, absolutely. But still, yeah. It's a skill. It's the skill we don't want our kids to develop. Right? So, again, just to hone in the point, you listening intently. It's about us listening intently. Right? That is one way that we can help them build social emotional skills, and we can model it. The second part is being relaxed. Do not worry. How is this teaching kids social emotional skills? When you are relaxed. Why is that there?
It goes back to the story Tim told about his wallet being stolen. Because Timmy was relaxed with it. He wasn't all nervous and, oh my gosh, I'm going to do my license, my fingerprint card, my social security card is in there, the keys to his car. He wasn't worried about that. He was more concerned about the young boy not feeling like he can come back because he stole it. And that's what the student saw, was the not worrying. And I don't think our kids, because they've reached trauma by the age of 5, that's all they have is worry. I mean, if you think about most of our kids, they're worried all the time. When are they going to get their next snack? When is snack? If you hear, I mean, most of our kids ask, when is snack? Are we going to get snack? what's for snack, 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 that's because they probably don't know where their next meal is coming from. And so it's not because they're irritated or irritating to us because every 5 minutes they're asking for snack. It's because they're worried about not getting their next meal. So I think us being relaxed kind of shows them that everything will be okay.
Very good point.
I think for our role, if they're always under stress and their parents don't necessarily handle the stress in a good manner, when they see us stressed, because they do see us stressed, because this is a stressful job, but we're still able to talk to them calmly and not snap at them, not yell at them because we're under that stress. I think it's probably that example too of how to actually handle stress in a proper way.
Another good point. What else? Who can tell me why being relaxed matters? Rima.
Do the thing. So when you're relaxed, you're more logical. So you're making logical decisions when you're relaxed.
It also goes back to what we said. Remember de-escalation? De-escalation takes what? Compassion, patience, kind words, gentle words, right? A whole lot of self-control. And how can you get there? How can you respond that way? When you are in a state that you are not in stress. Because when you're stressed, you are not bound to be compassionate. How many of you are compassionate when you're stressed? You are? Really? Like if you're hurrying to the office and you're late and you see somebody that is like needy on the side, you will stop.
If I know them.
If you know them, right? But for the most part, we ignore those things when we're stressed. When do we only notice those things? When we're walking and things are relaxing and are like, oh, look at that poor guy. Compassion, worry does not breed compassion. Sorry, it does not. The more worried you are, the less compassionate you become. Do not worry, do not worry, do not worry. Things will be okay. See, because when you're not worried, you're more logical. It goes back to this. The higher your stress level is, the more emotional you get. The more emotional you get, the worse decision-making skills you have. Showing kids to be relaxed, to be mindful. Teaches them a very, very important skill, or models a very, very important skill. Why else does being relaxed matter? Emotion control. Kids are not stupid. They know you're irritated and they know they irritate you. They know that. They know that you are stressed. They know that as an adult you have a billion things you need to do. But they see you relax. What powerful message does that communicate? I got this. You can. And if they see that they can't push your buttons, all of a sudden that teaches them a different form of self-control. See, but as adults, we let kids push our buttons. We don't set the pace. We don't know how to lead. We react. That's why we can't de-escalate, because we want to fight their emotion with our own emotion, forgetting that it's not about you. Right? So being relaxed, staying relaxed. The other thing that being relaxed teaches them is that, especially when they make mistakes, this is so important, that mistakes can be corrected. When you correct kids and you're irritated or worried as you correct them, they learn that mistakes are a terrible thing. And chances are, if you're worried, you don't let them correct the mistakes. What do you do as an adult? Let's all be vulnerable and honest. When a kid makes a mistake and you're stressed out, what do? You do it for them. Here, you're taking too long. Let me do it for you. I've done it. Again, I'm a parent. I know this to be a reality. Teachers do it all the time. I do it coaching sometimes. Yeah, you know what? Forget it. Let me do it for you. But again, when you're relaxed and you show them that relax and you're calm, you're not worried, right? You can show them that their mistakes can be corrected and they can correct it themselves. And that mistakes does not equal emotion. Mistake equals action. But to most of our kids, mistake equals stress and emotion. And that's how they solve the world. And you watch their parents, they do the same thing. And they become adults, they do the same thing, that when they make a mistake, instead of staying relaxed and problem solving, what do? What do some adults do?
They're all mad and then walk back down and walk back up.
Yeah, they freak out. Walk up and down the stairs mad, right? But again, right, being relaxed and being calm teaches them that mistakes can be corrected. That it does not equate an emotional reaction. Mistakes don't equate an emotional reaction. What else, when you are relaxed and calm, what else does it show kids? What else do you have the capacity for? What was that? Patience. It goes back to our whole idea of being able to de-escalate, being gentle, being kind. Huh? Showing love, being compassionate. Part of our problem as adults is we never stop worrying. And we interact with kids with a worry. We're just worried all the time. Traumatized kids already come in with a stress. I want you guys to remember that. They're already at, that whole wavelength, they're already at the middle all the time. And then you add to that, guess what happens? They learn to live in that, and they think that's normal. I'm gonna share a personal story here. We had 2 kids that we allowed to sleep over at our house. On the way to the drive, and maybe I should give a little bit more context. The mom comes in to pick them up, and she was high. And so we were like, why don't you just leave your kids with us for a little bit, and then you go do what you need to do, and then come back for them. She took that as, oh, my kids can sleep over. She took off and left for the entire weekend. It was on a Friday. I'm not joking. She came back Monday as if nothing happened. And I'm like, oh, wow. Driving to the house, the little boy makes a comment and says, Mr. Jansen, are you not angry while you're driving? What do you mean? Well, you're not cussing out, and you're not honking. I'm like, no, I'm just driving, dude. It's like, that's so weird. I'm like, what? They ate spaghetti. Top of that story, they ate spaghetti, and we served them a plate, and they started sharing, right? And we're like, no, that's your own plate. Own plates? Yeah, we're fine. Then sleeping time comes. And one of the kids gets up and says, is it always this quiet? I'm like, well, it's 9:30 at night. And again, I'm not making the connection here. This was like early into our years of higher ground. I'm like, it's 9:30 at night. It's bedtime. It's quiet time. Oh, goes back in the room. 30 minutes later, comes out. It's too quiet. We're like, what do you mean it's too quiet? There's like no noise. Like, is everyone okay? We're like, yes, we're okay. Go back to sleep. And they slept. I mean, they slept like babies after that. But again, understanding that our kids are constantly in a stressed out state. This may be the only place where they find a person who's not worried. It's powerful when you are not in a worry state. It's powerful for you because you're more effective, but it's also a powerful example for them. All right? Here's the other thing. When you are relaxed, right, and you're not in a worried state, right, what do you tend to do? If you're relaxed and you're not in a rushed, worried state, when a person wants to spend time with you, what do? You give time. There is no more important kid than the kid you're in front of. Always remember that. There's no more important kid than the kid you're in front of. That's why here we designed it so differently, and even community schools, we designed it to be one-on-one. Because there's no more important kid than the kid you're dealing with. And again, when you're not relaxed and calm, you don't give time. That's just human nature. When I'm stressed out, I don't spend time with my family. I'm taking care of my stress. I'm taking care of my worry. That's what I do. So being able to relax gives them the time, and it shows them a different model. Right? These are literally 2 simple things that you can start off regardless of what activity it is. That's why we discourage you from yelling at kids. Even when you're playing in a big group, we tell you, count down. Don't yell at them. Be quiet, everybody shut up. We don't do that. Count down, relax. Even with the kids, I've learned, even in jiu-jitsu, the most effective way I can quiet them down now is to, all right, and literally, the people who watch me sometimes, they'll see me do this. Everybody take a deep breath. Inhale, exhale. And about 5, 6 breaths later, the class slowly quiets down. I've stopped using the countdown actually in jiu-jitsu because now I've pre-programmed them to just do that. Breathe, relax. If everybody did that, first thing that you can have them do, okay, let's relax. Take a deep breath, relax. It's gonna be okay. And here's the other message I want you guys to do. A lot of your worries ain't gonna get better if you're worried about it. Just a simple thing right there. What's your worry gonna do?
Makes you think about it more.
And?
And you come up with solutions.
No, you don't. You kill brain cells.
Is that why?
Again, a whole loop, remember? When are you most logical? When do you come up with the best solutions? When you are in a relaxed state. You come up with worse solutions when you're emotional because you're following emotions. I'm telling you right now, just from a personal side note, you worrying about your problem ain't gonna make it any better. It really isn't. I mean, go ahead, keep worrying about it.
And because this is a learned behavior, you're gonna mess up. You're not gonna be relaxed with the kid. But know this, that when you go back to the kid and say, you know what, I'm so sorry, I blew up on you, or I was irritated with you, that shows that student, what? Nobody's ever apologized to me because of something an adult did. want that respect, because that's 80% of our kids are in a gang, you know, or their family is the gang. And so that's a big thing for them is respect. So when you're apologizing to a student, you know why our building hasn't been broken into a lot. Because the gang families are saying, hey, they respect us. Don't touch that building, that's all it is. And that's what they've told us that. The parents have told us that.
To give you guys like how crazy the statistic is, when this was a school, the place was getting tagged every break. Every single break when it was open as a school. In the 5 years that we've been here, we've been tagged twice. In 5 years. Twice. It went from every break, every break, whether it's Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, winter break, spring break, any break, to twice in 5 years. But again, another skill in forgiveness is respect. Because again, remember, respect is part of social awareness. Perspective taking is a skill. That's part of forgiveness, being able to take a different perspective. So, just in the whole act of practicing forgiveness, you can practice perspective taking, respect for others, impulse control. Because let's be real, is it your impulse to apologize? What is your impulse? To blame something else or somebody else. When something goes wrong in the world, what do? We blame. When we make a mistake, we blame. That is our impulse, right? That is identity, like identifying emotions. You hurt me. That hurts. That's okay to tell to a kid, by the way. That's part of the reason why you need to apologize. Because it hurt me. You hurt people. That's being able to identify emotions. That's being able to recognize relationships and communicate and build relationships. And and like I said, in the most important essence from a character building perspective, it's one of the most selfless acts to forgive or to ask for forgiveness, because it's humiliating. Apologizing to a kid is humiliating. Unless you're really, really self-confident. But apologizing in general is humiliating. How many of you like apologizing to your significant other and admitting that they were right and you were wrong? She's always wrong in my head, but I'm always wrong in practice. That's how it works. Right? But again, these are three simple, intentional things you can do in your daily interactions with a youth that literally encourage social emotional skills. I gave you guys an example, a game as simple as dodgeball. Now, a long time ago, social emotional skills was not a problem because we had playgrounds and we had familial and community interactions. The other reason why it wasn't a problem is because arts were encouraged. We took arts from the schools now. Think about theater, think about drawing, think about dance, think about martial arts. Think about all the things we do here and how much social emotional skills it takes. Drawing takes a lot of social emotional skills, especially in a real art class where you are critiquing art as well. Right? All these forms of art, because of our focus in just academics, we no longer want to build whole humans. Right? Because of our focus in that, are now gone. That's why we do them here. A simple recess, simple playground, social emotional skills. But most importantly, social emotional skills develop when adults practice it intentionally. When you teach it intentionally. And it's as simple as listen to them intently. Listen to them intently. Show them to be relaxed. Be relaxed in front of them. Be calm. Finally, practice forgiveness. Own up to a mistake. Have them own up to a mistake. You should not have a problem telling a kid, you need to apologize for what you did. You should not have a problem doing that. And make them. And don't let them do this simple, sorry. No. Sorry.
Sorry
No.
for what I'll do.
Yeah, tell them why. Explain to your peer, even if it's between peers, explain to them why. Let them repair it. Give them the power to repair it. Don't fix it for them. Give them the power to repair it. Questions about this, comments, before we go to reflection. Questions, reflections? I will end it with this then, and then we will go to a reflection that we will write. Working and teaching social emotional skills is really about you practicing your own social emotional skills. It's about you having the love, the patience, the self-control, the gentleness, the ability to communicate. It's about you having and practicing those skills. Because these skills, you can't just teach them in a curriculum. You have to model them. And like I said, we would be in a much better spot if adults actually just practice them. We wouldn't need to exist. But because adults no longer practice them, we have to do this. So part of our reflection is these three questions. The first question, from the trauma, talking about trauma and why understanding individual choices and building skills from that point and even to yesterday's, right? And understanding our social philosophy to all the way to this, to social emotional learning, how it builds and why it's so important. Name one aha moment. If it's not an aha, name one disagreement. Or if it's not a disagreement, name one challenging concept for you. So first question. The second question, all right, is I want you to look into your own life and I want you to be honest. Think of your own social emotional skills. Think of your own character traits. Of the things that we've mentioned, and we've mentioned a lot, and I'm sure even without the list you can think about this. Name one that you know you need to work on. Name one that you know you need to work on. And I don't want you just to name one what you're going to work I don't want you just to name it. As a follow-up question to that, how are you going to improve in that? I want you to really think about that. How are you going to improve in that? If you know you miss on something, I mean, we name grit, we name self-control, we name being respectful, we name empathy, we name so many skills. Name one skill that you know you're not strong and that you need to improve on. Because we constantly tell the kids, be a better version of themselves. But how many adults really strive to be a better version of themselves? Right? You're not a leader if you can't do the things that you're asking others. So if we want kids to be a better version of themselves, we need to be a better version of ourselves. And then the third part is a much happier reflection. Right? Name people in your life that help you develop your social emotional skills that you are strong at. So name them. Who are they? How did they do it? So name people in your life that you know you're good at self-control because of this person, or you're good at just name them. Do those three questions make sense? Who needs me to repeat them? First one is either an aha moment, a challenging moment, or a disagreement. The second one is a social emotional skill or a character trait that you know you need to work on. And what is your plan on improving on that? And then the third one, right, is name people in your life that help you develop some of your social emotional skill strengths. I'm going to be very real with you guys. the Monday and Tuesday's reflection from everybody has been amazing. All right, and it's been, I've read some things in there that I'm glad it's anonymous because I don't know who you are, but some of you admitted some things in there, and there are literally at least 3 or 4 letters that said, I can't tell anybody this, but blah, 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 blah. That's when reflection matters, when you can be that honest. All right, so be honest. And again, don't put your names on this. All right, just write it down and have a reflection. And this matters because, again, we constantly tell kids to be a better version of themselves. Let's do it ourselves.